Yeah, it's a bit loud, I think, man. It
Well,
might be
I'm just by myself. Like I don't have the headphones in anymore.
okay. Maybe it's just your magnificent voice, your baritone, Ilya. It's just like
I
causing
think
these
it's
like
just early
mind.
morning. Early morning. Yeah.
Maybe. Anyway, we're live, everybody. So welcome to Brainfood Live on Air. We're episode 90, and it may well be the final show of the year. I know I said I was going to do one on Christmas, but you know what, guys? I'm like really flagging right now. I think I'm coming to the end of the year and the kind of running on fumes. So I'm kind of in two minds whether I should do a show on Christmas Day. So this may be the last one we're going to do this year. Anyway, welcome to it. We've got another fantastic show for you because it's part 2 of our mini series from the developer's point of view. We had some amazing feedback from last week's episode, loads of people commenting on it and saying it was a really educational exercise. Hopefully today will be the same way. Again, we're going to get developers on the show. They're going to be the stars of it, and they're going to tell us what they think of a recruitment behavior or process or technique that we habitually use. Last week, it was all about recruiter messaging and outreach. This week is going to be about technical assessments. That stage where we move the developer to the point where, oh, yeah, we like you, but we don't know whether you're any good. Let's give you a test. How are we testing developers? What do they think about these different techniques? So it should be really good. Anyway, before we kick off, let's do a quick sound check. We are multicasting, folks. So people who can hear me on Crowdcast, please say hello. I can see some chat already there, but I just want to make sure audio is okay from your side. So just please say, yes, Hong, I can hear you okay. Same goes for LinkedIn. We are multicasting on LinkedIn Live. We got 3,000 views last time, I think. So that was a massive amount. So I want to make sure everyone in LinkedIn can hear me okay. If so, please put a comment in there. Just say, Hong, yes, I can hear you okay. Get on with it. Finally, Facebook Live. We are in the Facebook group. So we should be broadcasting there. If I've pressed the right button, let me just check. Yes, I am. If you can hear me on there and you're ready to go, just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I don't really care. Just let me know whether you can hear me okay. Okay, fantastic. We've got some comments coming in, which is really good. Let's kick off. Again, we have a new format, therefore a new co-host, and it's Ilya Brodsky, CEO of VanHack. Ilya, you're getting up super early in the morning, so I really appreciate you going the extra mile for Brainfood Live. Great to have you with us again, man.
I'm really excited to be here. 6 a.m. calls usually aren't my forte, but for the Brainfood Live community, it's a pleasure, really.
That's it. And we're very, very pleased to have you here. I mean, because the time zoning of where I am, usually we don't get the chance to speak to people in San Francisco, West Coast, and so on. So it's a real great to get your view in here. And also, as a person that is managing like a massive community of software developers, and going through the process and helping them get jobs, I'm sure you've encountered this circumstance. How do companies assess them? Be very interested also in your perspective on this as well. Anyway, Ilya, we always kick off with a quick review of Brainfood from last week. Did you read it? If so, what was interesting? If not, be honest.
No, I think the first article was definitely the best one. The LinkedIn kind of teardown. I forget exactly the title, but it was hilarious. Definitely made me feel a little bit self-conscious because I am a LinkedIn power user. And it was really funny. Like, yeah. I forget the name of the article. It was something like
LinkedIn alternative
universe. Just showed all the use cases, and everyone needs to read that. That's it. Alternative universe, the LinkedIn alternative universe. It's too funny.
Yeah, you heard it from Ilya there. I mean, basically everyone needs to read this post because it's super funny. I think everyone reading, everyone watching the show right now is probably a LinkedIn Power user. Let's face it, it's used by recruiters and salespeople like predominantly. And we use it a lot because we're on it all the time. Every day. I mean, I can't remember the last time I went through a working day where I didn't actually check LinkedIn. But this is not normal behavior, right? I mean, most human beings, most civilians, I tend to call them, just get on with life. And LinkedIn is like, yeah, I set it up 3 years ago when I was looking for work, and I don't check it every day because you know what, it's all pro work.
Yeah.
But recruiters aren't this way. Check it habitually. And this person basically said, hey, actually, folks, you're in this like super weird bubble, and your behavior is actually really strange to observe if you're an outsider looking at all of this. So very, very funny post. And, you know, humor, I think, Ilya, I don't know if you agree with me on this, just to think about humor for a little bit, but it kind of needs to be true, doesn't it, for it to be funny? You know, if it was completely, you know, falsehood, complete fiction, it wouldn't land as a humorous piece. But this one actually really worked because it exaggerated, but it did pluck out, oh yeah, this is what an influencer might typically say, and boom, it was a quick example. And it made me a bit self-conscious. I have to be honest, I kind of scrolled through it first to see whether I'd be lampooned on there at some point.
I thought you were that was funny.
Because I'm pretty convinced I'm guilty of a lot of these things. So at some point, someone's going to have a problem with it and say, this guy. But yeah, very, very funny.
Yeah, the best one was I forget the exact post. I guess I should open up here where they were like the recruiter was saying how he gave someone a chance because the person had they were interviewing them, but they had poor Wi-Fi or something like that, and they weren't able to do the interview in another place. And then it's like, oh, the king gave me a job. Like, I'm so good because they gave the person a job. I forget exactly what it was. It was pretty. Yeah, I actually remember seeing that post because it went viral, and at the time I was like, yeah, that's a great post. But then you look at it, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's just a little bit self-serving. And I think a lot of like, I'm definitely guilty of that, like a little humble brag. Yeah, I was interviewing a candidate through Skype last week, blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing is that she said, oh, so in the weird world of LinkedIn, people use Skype in 2020.
I was going to say, you already know that's not true. I mean,
yeah, it's actually funny. We started using Skype for our interviews, which is like, I have to admit that, like we found that Zoom was only 40 minutes. So for our interview scheduling, we're not able to use Zoom because they don't let us use a pro account for some reason at the technical. So we actually, Skype is created a Zoom competitor that's actually good and unlimited time. So there you go.
That's really interesting. And also I remember Skype maybe 2 years ago came out with a coding sort of product, didn't they? Where you could share like a screen and stuff. And I thought, wow, maybe Skype comes back with this, but then you hear nothing. And you just wonder whether it was a great idea that somehow got lost in that monster of, you know, how do things get shipped anymore there. I have no idea. They probably have times 10 the amount of engineers that Zoom has, but they can't move things out. So real shame there.
And one more that I thought was hilarious was the guy who said he was dead on LinkedIn.
Oh my God.
The Sakil from Gumroad passed away 2018, do not contact.
Oh my goodness. You know what? It's a funny one, but it is also actually a very interesting challenge for all social platforms, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Like how do we handle it when people actually have passed on? Because obviously these profiles might actually outlive us, and there's no way, you know, we're locked into it, and obviously no one's checking our accounts and stuff. I think there's a service actually where you sign up to them, and they will actually check if you have passed beyond the mortal realm, so to speak, and you'll give them kind of preemptive rights to go and shut stuff down, or at least post something to say, you know what, Hung's gone or something.
It reminds me of the Dark Mirror episode where they took all the social profiles of the husband after he passed away and created a kind of an AI version of him. Robots, later on. Yeah. I
saw that as well. Amazing, right? And you can imagine this being close, like with was it GPT-3, whatever it's called? Where you're simply taking so much data out there and being able to almost have AI speak in a human-like way. You just wonder whether someone who's like super prolific online, let's say you and me, fairly prolific online, there's a lot of data we've typed into this machine that could probably replicate the way in which we communicate. How many videos have I done? It's like hundreds of hours. So probably people know how I speak, the tone, the things I say. I've only got like vocabulary of 200 words, right? Most people use like a very limited amount of words. So you could totally deep fake, a digital hung, I guess.
Same here.
Anyway, listen, let's get on with the show, Ilya. Before we kick off, actually, you're in a weird position because you're actually sponsoring the show, and we never talk about it, but we should talk about it briefly. So give VanHack a quick blurb. What is it? What does it do? Why do people need to check it out?
Yeah, so we're a community of software developers from all over the world, about 200,000 people. We started off actually as an English school to teach developers soft skills, English, and especially developers from places where English isn't a first language. And then quickly realized that we can also help companies hire senior talent and diverse tech talent from around the world, and either have them work remotely or actually relocate to their cities. We're just about to hit 1,000 hires, which is exciting. We're at 997 with a bunch of offers on the table and final round interviews. So yeah, we're excited to hit that milestone. And last thing I'll say is that we're launching a free ATS next February. So very kind of simple to start, but hopefully we'll be able to take on the big guys towards the end of next year with this applicant tracking system that we're building.
And that's the price point that all Brainfood subscribers love the best, free. So make sure you check that out. If there's any kind of demo or free link to that, feel free to bang it into the chat stream. Ilya, I'm sure people will want to at least investigate. Okay, listen, folks, we are talking from the developer's point of view. So without further ado, let's get on with it. A technical assessment. I made a big list. By the way, folks, I put a poll down there. I want you all to actually check this out and potentially put a vote down on the poll. And in fact, if you've got any other ideas as to how we assess software engineers, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But basically, I think there's a bunch of them: CV profile review, code sample review, online test, take-home exercise, tech-to-tech interview, whiteboard exercise, paired programming, work trial. I think that's basic. I don't know if anybody's got any more ideas as to how you technically assess somebody. Please let me know, and I'll introduce them into the poll as well. Have a vote on there because I want to see what you guys think of this. Let's put it to you, Ilya. Assessing software engineers. How do you do it? Do you have an idea what is good or bad? Before we bring the devs on board ourselves, sort of shortly, let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll say that it's really hard because there's so many different types of developers and so many different types of what is a good developer for different companies and different stages. We used to use HackerRank as a coding provider. We changed to another platform just a couple months ago called Qualified for a variety of reasons I can get into. And we also just hired a technical interviewer who's doing a technical assessment, an actual 30-minute, 1-hour conversation, just because we found the coding tests weren't really sufficient for understanding if someone's good or not. They're a nice proxy, but it's often misleading. So I think next year, kind of going forward from now, going to be focused much more on the actual technical screen or having a person do an interview with you. And I feel like that's still the best way to go. That's
really interesting, Ilya, because you obviously have to do very high volume numbers of people into the process and so on. But you use the online tooling. It was good, but not necessarily a good map to the person's capability. And you've gone to face-to-face interview. Quick one as to why you think online testing doesn't quite do it accurately enough for you. What was your key discovery there?
We just got a lot of feedback from employers that that's not really the kind of work that they do day to day. Like when you're working, it's much more collaborative problem solving, approaching a problem and figuring out how to solve it rather than just kind of solving the algorithmic challenge. So it's just a different mindset, or not mindset, but different skill set really. And people can train a lot these HackerRank tests, codability tests.
Train to pass it, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like, like the IELTS exam, maybe you speak decent English, but you really train so you can say the connecting words or whatever. I don't know exactly the test, but it's like I think an average American would probably fail the IELTS exam or get a really bad score. And so, but they can still work and have a conversation. So it's a little bit of like that. But it is like a nice just to weed out and say, hey, this person did get X percentage, and we have that on the profile. You can download the test. So there are some positives about it. We obviously use it, and I think the reason we do is because of scale, right? Like it's really hard to do a technical interview with 1,000 people, and really expensive, to be honest. Whereas you can do that at scale, kind of with with a coding test. So that's kind of the first level filter. And then we're now experimenting if we do 2 filters, where it's a coding test and a person doing an interview, will that dramatically increase our conversion rate from interview for sending the candidate to hire? So we'll see. It's still early days, but I'm pretty optimistic that'll help increase our conversion rate.
That's a really useful insight. 2 useful insights here, actually, Ilya, and we'll explore these in a moment when we bring people on. Firstly, most modern development is actually a collaborative exercise, whereas assessments, I think, as far as I've seen, are all individuated assessments. Like you're assessing the one person in isolation from other people and assessing that person's technical skills, quote unquote. But in fact, when this person is working, they're going to be joining a team, and there'll be natural collaboration. In fact, their ability to collaborate is a significant part of how well they are going to be as a performer in that organization. So number one, I think employers need to think about, okay, is the role collaborative? What is the collaboration intensity of the position? If it is high intensity, like this person literally needs to be day-to-day speaking to the people, then perhaps the online test needs to be first filter, not only filter. Some coding challenges maybe aren't that way, where, the coding jobs literally is you're sitting there by yourself monitoring one system or doing one thing, then perhaps, okay, maybe the online test becomes more prominent and more viable as a solution because the collaborative intensity is lower. Second thing you mentioned was the scaling aspect. Obviously, the better the test, the harder it scales. It's as simple as that, right? That's the trade-off.
Yeah, and I think it's different for us because like we are a marketplace, a recruiting platform, so we have to kind of find the diamonds in the rough out of the thousands of people in the platform. Maybe also for larger employers too, they have this problem. But if you're hiring a few developers in your startup, maybe it's worth doing the test, maybe not. A lot of times our customers, they do a test up front, and that's a little bit of a challenge because the developer's like, why should I even take this? Like, what's the reason? I'm sure we'll get into the conversation with developers on the call, but you don't want to be taking a 4 to 8 hour coding challenge when, and especially if it's like, work on this project as a coding challenge, then we'll use the code in our app, and the person's like, what's going on?
Oh wow, so, yeah. I've heard some horror stories like that before. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah.
That's super interesting. I mean, this is by the way, Ilya, I wanted you to contribute to the conversation as we go forward, because you've got a lot to offer here. There's another thing that you've mentioned, which I think is super interesting, which is this nature of it's not only scale, but it's the maturation of the group, right? So if you're like a massive business and you're always hiring developers because you want to grow, you want to have that capacity internally, but perhaps they're not necessarily hyper focused on any one critical project, then yeah, you could do an online test, or you can do those types of higher volume type of approach. But if you're like hiring for a CTO or a lead engineer for your one app that you're building, then you need to have a much more hands-on approach. You can't sort of, you can't have a off-the-shelf solution that would do that particular job. So maturation of the department or business, super interesting as well. About maturation.
Whoever solves this problem will be very successful because it's a huge problem. It's like, there's the reason why HackerRank raised $50 million or whatever they did, and there's a bunch of other players in the field. John Rose mentioned Carrot. There's many of these kind of platforms out there, and no one's really solved it. There's no kind of bulletproof way, and I guess maybe that's an unsolvable problem because there's so many variables. But it's something that, like, if you can figure out who a good developer is at scale for a given employer, that's what we're trying to do, I guess. But it's so hard.
It's difficult. You're right. I mean, CodeSignal just raised 25 million as well. Well done, Tigran, by the way, good friend of mine. And Codility raised 40 million last year. So everyone's like piling into this. I think COVID-19 and the shift to remote generally has kind of put a big booster for all assessment tech of all types. But yeah, it's a big problem to solve. And I think you're right. No one's actually got the finger on exactly on the button, even though they're all very cool products to use. Anyway, let's bring on some people that may help us chat this through. I'm going to bring on two friends of mine from a fairly mature company, but it's not necessarily a mature tech business. I think these are from the Financial Times. So Christine and Tatiana, they're going to come and join us here, hopefully, and talk to us about how they do tech assessment. Oh, there's Tatiana. Hello.
Hello, I'm Tatiana, and I'm a senior engineer at the Financial Times. Nice to meet you.
Great to see you, Tatiana. And there's Christine. Hey, Christine. Oh, good Lord. There was some horrible audio there, Christine. Could you check that?
Is that better?
No. Now she's gone mute. That's okay. I think she'll fix that. You know what? Bluetooth, maybe Crowdcast doesn't like Bluetooth. It just blasts people's ears out. I think, Ilya, you had this problem before.
Yes.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect,
Oh,
Christine.
great. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like, I swapped my laptop and I've just had to reset everything. So, I'm back to square one with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's it. I swapped my laptop as well. I went and bought one of those M1 MacBooks, and I thought, yeah, why not do this? And yeah, it's a computer. Great.
Yeah, MacBooks, because like everything I used to use, you've now got to swap it all out to Type-C chargers and stuff. So it's just, mess.
Oh, yeah, I have felt that pain. I mean, I've got multiple adapters going through this situation right now. So
yeah, I'm not complaining. It's a great laptop, though. It's awesome. I love it.
I am complaining, but this is not what people are paying to listen for. So let's get on with the show. Tatiana, just to introduce yourself real quick. How about you introduce yourself quickly, Christine?
Sure. Hi, good to see everyone again. So yeah, I sit on the talent team at the FT. So I've been here actually nearly 3 years now. And previously I've worked in a startup and a mobile development agency. So about 6 years experience now, predominantly working in tech hiring. So hopefully I've got a few stories to share on the assessment front.
Cool. Yeah. So you already heard a little bit about sort of what Ilya and I kicked off the conversation with regards to, how difficult this is. What would you say is, your feeling when you're sort of told to do a tech a challenge? And I put this one to you, Tatiana. I hope you don't mind. But you're a lady, obviously, most close to hand in the sense that you've been given these things to do, but what makes you feel, oh my goodness, I got to do this thing, or what makes you think, okay, this is a fair test?
I think generally I'm more like excited now that I'm more experienced. I'm kind of excited to get to do a task that is generally, a lot of the tests I see are like a very pleasant code kata. It's like a smaller piece of work than what we'd have in our day-to-day job. So I generally find tech tests quite pleasant. The things that make me would make me dislike them is if they're too long and if they assume that you have a lot of personal time to go through them. I have a child and I just don't have that much time outside of my work to do tech interviews. So I think I really appreciate when those tests are take into account, or just asking for a limited amount of your time.
You know what? That's a really interesting introduction of a problem that actually, I hadn't had foremost in my mind. But there's obviously an accessibility and diversity issue with the type of test you select. So in other words, if you're saying, hey, this is a 6-hour project, that's all well and good. This person needs to have 6 hours available, right? So number one, this is someone who may be out of work. So straight away, someone who's in work is going to struggle to do the same performance because they don't have the time. So think about how you're prejudicing the market there. Secondly, we're talking about home environment. Let's say, do it on the weekend. What if this person doesn't have like the home environment, which is really suitable to do 6 hours worth of work? This is actually a big problem with diversity and inclusion in the remote world, because we're all assuming everyone's got a very safe and secure home environment. Guess what? There's some people, unfortunately, do not have that. and they really don't need to be in the house longer than is ideal the case. But if they're working from home, quote unquote, they have no choice. They're not going to perform well in this scenario. And you talk about caregiving, primary caregivers. I mean, I would really think that's a huge thing that employers haven't even thought about when it comes down to remote working. Because how are we even measuring performance and stuff like this? I assure you, your performance is not going to improve if you've got 3 kids running around. As you're doing whatever kind of job it is, it's impossible. You're getting interrupted all the time. And yet, this is, I think, a really coming concern for DE&I in future, particularly as we go to shift to a more remote, even remote first type of format. Anyway, gone off on a bit of a rant there, Tatiana. Let's talk about timing. You mentioned time. So you're necessarily someone who is sensitive to time. You don't have a lot of it. You're a time poor candidate. What is an acceptable amount of time to do a technical test?
I mean, I think for me, 2 hours. And I think there's also some things. You can have a technical test that's solving a problem if it's a take-home technical test, and then you can also ask questions that are quite open-ended to try and suss out the strengths of the candidate. And I think that can also be very useful because there might be a number of ways the tech test could be solved, and that may or may not reveal the strength of a candidate. So I think having extra questions as to why they solved it this way, or having some questions that could be answered in a way that can show front end or back end skills, I think that can also be really useful. But yeah, I wouldn't. If I see a tech test that expects me to work for a day, this is a blank no. I'm just not going to do it unless you pay for my childcare.
That might be an option in the future. We'll pay for your childcare to do the test.
I think the pay challenges are coming. I mean, some companies do actually not incentivize, but they at least cover something to recognize there's extra work there. I think Whereby, which is a company our friend Jess works for, they pay for technical tests, not the hourly rate developers might charge. It's a small token amount, I think 200 or something like this. But it's at least something to say, you know what, we totally get it that you're doing extra for us. And, please take this as whatever success or fail, you got this, at least you got something, for your effort. Tatiana, I have to say, 2 hours I thought was quite generous of you. For you, I was surprised. I thought this lady's going to give us 35 minutes, 40 minutes or something, and then out. But you think 2 hours is fair?
I think it is, but I discriminate quite a lot about which companies I would apply for. I wouldn't. I'm the kind of person who would research a company a lot or know people in the company before applying. So I think once I've made the decision to even apply, I'm kind of already quite motivated.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I hope you're not doing any now.
No.
Great examples, but linking to that, I think all really good points. I think you touched upon the diversity part and the time point. So actually, if we do come to say paying for the candidate do the test, you're hoping that you're screening them well enough in the upper funnel. So by the time they pass the test, you're paying them, you're all invested this time. You better hope there's a 90% chance that they're going to get the job at the end of it, right? You shouldn't really be mass sending tests. Obviously, I think, Ilya, you mentioned earlier, if you get high volume candidates as a junior role, then, the situation's different. But a lot of our hiring is mainly on like mid to senior level. So there's a lot of effort involved on an end to end. But yeah, I think on that diversity part as well, like what we found a couple months ago, because we ran a couple of initiatives this year, specifically with apprentices. And I don't know, we just automatically expected everyone to have a laptop and you'd be able to do the test at home. But one of our apprentices came back and said they didn't have a laptop at all. And that's something we didn't even consider. We're like, oh my God, we just like by default just assumed everyone would have a laptop. And then we're like, okay, how are you going to do the test? So I think they had to go to the library. They had to get access somewhere else or borrow it from a mate. So there's a lot of things that actually got us thinking, okay, we need to be very wary. Like, which communities are we reaching out to, what access do they have, and as Tatiana mentioned, like if you have childcare, etc., not give them a 6-hour long test, like 1 hour max. So I think most talent teams should be partnering up with engineers and teams to think about the user experience, or at least the candidate experience in mind, before designing a 6 to a 10-hour tech test.
Yeah. On that note, I mean, again, everyone who's in this LinkedIn alternative universe has a laptop. We are working in this world. However, particularly people who are younger, coming up in their careers, just entering the workforce, they may not have a laptop. The phone is the primary device. That is the way in which they consume the internet. That's the way in which you can get through your 16, 17-year-old sort of time frame. Just purely doing that. You don't necessarily need to have a £500,000 computer to do those things. So again, accessibility is super important. How do we fix it on technical test? I actually don't know, because probably you're going to need to type into a keyboard to do it, unless we do things like tech interview or we have different types of assessment techniques. Okay, let's have a look at some of these different techniques, because we talked about the online test as and it seems that the ones that we're referring to are the take-home tests, the ones that I've sent you a challenge, Tatiana, you're off, you can do it. Probably I'm saying do it whenever you want to do it, just spend 2 hours or so. What about the stuff that's like online? Like you have to jump on to do it, and it's like there's something you're looking at, and we mentioned HackerRank before, Codility, these types of products. You're doing it, you're online, it's like, I think timed even. So you're there and you have to set aside a fixed point before it stops. What are your thoughts on that type of approach?
I mean, I guess it could be useful, but as a very first point of filtering, I've done one a long time ago. It was quite fun. It was very easy. The problem is, I think you're really trying to filter just enough to not waste the time of the employees that are going to be doing the face-to-face interview afterwards. But you want to be careful not to have, if you're having one of those online tests where like no interaction is possible, maybe there's limited time, you can't ask questions, you have to be very careful, because you might have an engineer that's blocked because they're not used to that particular coding language, and maybe they would excel, and if they just had a bit of time to research, then they could master the language and do great, and you don't want to miss out on an engineer like this. So I would be a little bit wary of them and really try and, I think you might miss out on candidates if you're using a type of tool that limits the language you can use or the amount of interaction you can have.
When would be a good time to use such a product? Because I'm thinking, you're right, Tatiana, definitely this is there to constrain the number of people that hit the interview, let's say, but there might be a scenario where you want to do that. So I'm thinking, I don't know, let's say you posted a remote job for an entry-level person or whatever it is, and maybe that's the time to deploy something of this type.
Yeah, I would agree. And when I did one is when I was applying for my first job as a junior engineer. So yeah, I think that then that's the right time, where you're really mostly filtering for the basic knowledge that an engineer would need to be able to learn more. Okay,
so that's wonderful insight. I think, Christine, you mentioned this as well. The seniority of the role actually has an impact on the appropriateness of the type of assessment. The more it seems like, by the way, if anybody disagrees with us here, please do comment and let us know whether this is correct or not. But to summarize what we've talked about, I think we're saying online coding challenge is probably best deployed to a junior to mid-level candidate that's applying to your job. You have it up there. They have to do this test in order to get to the next stage. That may be okay. Where you're looking at senior, medium to senior level, maybe you can't throw that test in there because there's other ways in which you need to interact. There's a candidate experience aspect you've got to think about. And there's also, you might be missing out on rarer talent, if you like, by using this technique. Thoughts on that? Is that a fair summary, or have I mischaracterized people's comments there?
Yeah, I think pretty much in general, because I used HackerRank in my last role for mid to seniors, and I think the team had quite a high expectation, like they must make 100% or else we're going to completely disregard it. So that meant people who scored like 94 or 96 were automatically disregarded. And to Tatiana's point, it's like maybe, they're a bit rusty on React, but they have had exposure to it in the past. So yeah, are we actually discounting people just because maybe they didn't have the right documentation or right tests in place? Whatever it is, however they assess it automatically. So I think that there is danger there that you're completely disregarding for someone just for one or two very minor mistakes.
You know what, Christine? Go ahead, Ilya. Go ahead.
So, sorry, just jump in. I want to agree completely with what you just said, Christine. We see a lot of our hiring partners have the same mindset as you mentioned in your previous role, where they have to get a certain score. And I feel like it is a little bit unfair because a lot of people, something happens, they open the computer. We have a lot of candidates who are in places where electricity sometimes goes out, brownouts happen, and things like that, family emergencies. And sometimes companies are reasonable and understanding, other times they're not. But I do feel like it's a little bit arbitrary to say, okay, you have to get a certain amount, and if you get 1% lower, it's
I think ego also comes into play sometimes. I think I see a lot of, well, I got 100, therefore everyone else should be able to get 100 type scenarios. So that was that. But yeah, I think give and take. I definitely do think the take-home tests it's after we have a chat to the candidate anyway, and we get their buy-in, we send them the tech test. The likelihood is that they will complete the test, as Tatiana mentioned. And the more relevant to the role it is, also the better. So my previous role, I think the main product at the time was to build like a data dashboard product. And the candidates were sent a task where they had to like build a, it's kind of like, it's a physics test from what I heard. And you have to like click around the screen and have like hundreds of balls like bouncing off in different parts of the screen. So candidates were like, what am I building here exactly? Like, how is this relevant to my day to day? So that was also quite interesting to see for me, because I got to play around with it. But again, like the candidates are like, is that what you're building over there? Like, what are you actually doing? So combined with not having a strong employer brand and a test that's not really relevant to what you're doing, we had a lot of drop off. So if you're going to do something like that, it's going to be similar, or at least still sell ourselves, still sell what they'll be working on during that process.
This is super interesting because every time you say something, Christine, you actually add on another like pathway that I want to follow. But I want to just explore this issue about the brand power of your business. Might actually then determine what kind of test is even feasible to do. So for instance, if you've got a weak brand, which majority of businesses are no brand in the sense the developers are not going to know who this business is, then if you've got this like really probably brilliant test, but you know what, it's going to take this amount of time, etc., you're not going to convert the candidates to do it unless you put a huge amount of individual effort per candidate to persuade them that that's worth it. Whereas if they're a name brand business, and this is, by the way, a real problem with how information is kind of aggregated generally, because developers are probably making the error there when they're thinking name brand, therefore, it's worth my time. Because there's lots of great companies that simply haven't got there yet, right? Or they may be doing stuff that isn't consumer related that actually is really cool stuff, but they're not able to make use of these tools. It practically won't work because you've already got this, your brand power isn't there to attract them in. Ilya, I wonder whether you could give a bit of insight there, because there's a platform, presumably you've got a bunch of companies there at varying levels of brand power, if you like. Have you seen like any variation in terms of how they're using tests, or what is your advice to those companies actually?
Yeah, definitely we do. We see a lot of the companies that are better known. Well, how can I say, put it nicely? The well-known brands that are large, but maybe not traditionally tech companies, move very slow and don't have the best processes. Then on the other hand, you have large companies that are well-known and maybe more textile companies. They have kind of what I would say kind of like the best type, or pretty good. The most exciting ones are kind of the best experience that I've seen are the mid-sized companies, because they can move quickly, they can give feedback fast, they have interesting tests, and they have a pretty good brand. So those would be the best ones. And then the smaller companies usually are pretty still early and trying to figure out what they're doing. So they don't have the most sophisticated process. So that's a really generalized view. Of course, there's a lot of companies that break this exception, break our exception to this rule. But that's kind of how I've seen. We've seen a lot of these larger employers just lose out on candidates because they have a 3 and 4 week hiring process with a bunch of steps and interviews, and then a startup comes in, does 2 or 3 interviews and gives an offer. So.
Okay, we're talking to two employees from FT here. So this is perfect. Because I would describe FT as exactly the kind of super mature business. Everyone knows the company, right? Big newspaper publisher, etc. However, you're both working in the tech kind of area. Was this a challenge that you had to re-engineer, or in the sense of, oh goodness, to compete for tech talent, we have to really retool the way in which we recruit, because we can't just say we're going to recruit like we would recruit any other FT person, and then throw in a few technical tests, and that's going to do the job, because it's going to take too long, and we're going to be outcompeted by, startup A, B, C, D, or E. What was the history of this? Christine, kick off with you on that.
So when I joined, because we have different teams within product and tech. So Tatiana sits in one of our largest teams. It's called customer products. So they build our flagship product and whatnot. So they were already quite sophisticated when I joined. And I think a lot of the time we were just kind of iterating it. So at the heart of everything that we do, which is around D&I, I think scorecards were one of the main things that we've really made the biggest change on in the last 2 years. So ensuring that the teams were all aware as to what they're assessing, both from a technical and behavioral perspective. And secondly, I think a lot of work was done on the competency framework as well, which helped both internal engineers, and Tatiana can shed more light on that, and also externally. So I can share with candidates, like, look, our teams are open to people from all different sorts of technologies. We use JavaScript here, but if you're able to demonstrate that, well, you can go past this test and then come meet us. And for us, it's a lot about our softer skills and around the competencies, and we'll explain more about that. But I think with the tweaks around that, it's actually been able to move pretty quickly. So we were counting our time to hire this year in 2020. So on average, our developer hires were about 30 to 35 days. That's including weekends, which is not too bad considering we've hired quite a few. I think about maybe 20 this year. So yeah, I was quite surprised because I thought it took longer than that. But I think once they do the tech test and they come on site, it's just one interview. So whenever the teams have to wash up, which ideally should be, within a day or two, like, we can move pretty quickly. But what do you think, Tatiana, around that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I remember the pace of recruitment accelerating as well, and it's very useful, especially for people who are already looking for a job or contractors. I can definitely see how speed is important. And yes, regarding the scorecards, that's definitely a very important thing to have to ensure fair recruiting. And I couldn't believe we didn't have one when I joined. I think all companies should have a list, a consistent list of the questions they ask and of what they're looking for in the answer. And that's the only way to ensure that all interviewers are able to assess candidates equally.
Because I think most of our because we were kind of asked this as well. We're doing a lot of retros last few weeks. Is what do we see as like the biggest gap? And for us, it's once they're in, they're in. Once they do the tests and go through the interview, it's great. But for us, most of the gaps are around levels. So someone would expect to be a senior 2, and then they'll come out as a mid, and vice versa. So I think it's just more around that internal alignment piece and external alignment piece. So hence why, externally, how do we communicate this to others? What does a senior mean to us versus other companies? That's probably one of our biggest challenges. But yeah, that's where that's
like a totally different, a huge challenge actually with technology, but also I think with any other role where there is a grading, there's almost an informal industry grading system. Where people, what is a senior developer? In one context, a senior developer walks in. I'm sure recruiters, by the way, have had this where you've taken someone who is a senior developer in one company. He goes through the process, and suddenly all of your existing engineers say, "No, that's a junior." It's like, how am I supposed to have the conversation with this person
Yeah.
who already thinks of him or herself at this level, when in fact they're going to come in at this junior ranking, and it's like a complete it's a mess. There's a protocol levels FYI, if anybody's heard of this. It's a US thing, but it's basically, I think, started off as a engineer-driven idea to try and basically equalize these levels market-wide. So it's essentially, Facebook engineers saying, "Hey, am I going to get more money out of Google?" And then sharing it with Google engineers and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm getting," and then doing it in such a way that people can say, "Right, level 3 in Google is actually a level 2 in Facebook," and showing it this way. I think it's a really useful tool. I think they're now charging a huge amount of money for it now. But anyway, it's useful, but it's kind of like an example of a market attempt response to the leveling problem, because no one agrees what these levels are. Folks, I've just realized what the time is, and you two are such great conversationalists that we've gone well into the next phase. So I'm going to have to let you go at this point, if that's okay. Please do hang around for the rest of the show. I might be able to get you back on in a bit, but I want to bring on Andy and Alla to talk about how they are dealing with some of these similar challenges. So thank you for your time, Tatiana and Christine. I will hopefully see you in a bit.
Cool.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice to meet you both.
Wow, I tell you what, Ilya, these conversations are so good that the time is flying on me without me actually being aware of it.
45 minutes,
I know these talks could literally be, or maybe we should do like a Joe Rogan style, 5-hour type things. But I think there's actually a Crowdcast limit on how long I can stay on screen. So there's Andy. Andy, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you again.
Hung Lee is the Joe Rogan of HR. Let them say that. Put that out there.
I don't think that's going to help my DE&I rating in any way. Alla, good to see you again. Again, quick introductions for people who don't know you. Andy, you go first.
Sure. Sorry, I'm Andrew. I'm an engineer at Monzo. I suppose in the last 10 years, I've had a lot of different roles in tech, so hopefully I've got a lot of different perspectives. That's me.
Cool. And how about you, Alla?
Yes, good. Yes, my name is Alla. I'm a technical recruiter, interim technical recruiter at Miro right now. But I'm also building tech communities, especially Slack community platform in Amsterdam. So happy to be here.
Great to have you both back. You were here last week, so you know the format. And we're talking about tech assessments today. I don't know whether you had the chance to listen in on the conversation with Tatiana and Christine there. We're talking about which types of tech tests are valid. And so far, we're focused on online and take home. Let's have a look at some of the other ways in which we could assess a software engineer's capability. Andrew, I'm going to be unfair to you. And I'm going to give you one which I think is probably a poor test, but it's the one that we all use anyway, which is the CV or profile review. Like the first thing we do is obviously scan that. And we're not doing it without intent. We are making assessments looking at this person's background. Now, firstly, as inadequate and as poor as this is, we have to accept we do it. What do you look for if you're coming across a candidate that you don't know, you've not worked with them before, that haven't gone through a technical test, but you're looking at CV? What is a thing that you're looking to spot from this person?
It's a good question. I think the number one thing that I look for is, I suppose, tenure at their current position. I think candidates that I've interviewed before, where they've spent like a long time, maybe like 8, 10, 12 years at a company working in the same team, doing the same thing. I think I've seen them struggle before to onboard into a new company. I think they get to a position where they have all of the context and they're fully comfortable in their role at the minute, and they feel that they can carry that into the next role, and it doesn't quite work out because it's completely uncomfortable. It's completely new. They don't have that context, and it's just a bit of a struggle. So that's the thing that I look for first.
Wow, super interesting, and I love it. I love it because people are going to criticize you, man, and I'm kind of up for that. No, but I love it because tenure is an issue. I mean, we've known about this for a long time in recruiting. We call it institutionalization. Like, oh, this person has been there for 10, 15 years, whatever the number you feel is too long. This person basically has just got so used to this way of behaving, they may struggle to come on. So what is an optimal amount of time that you're looking for tenure-wise? Max limit.
So I don't really look, I'm not kind of looking at like, oh, they've spent 6 years, so therefore they're going to have this level of comfort moving on. And this other person has 12 years, so they're going to like have like twice as harder.
Yeah, it's not mathematical.
It doesn't matter about the years. I think what it does is I sort of think of, I suppose, questions that I would pose to them to try and understand what level of comfort that they have currently and what level of like ability they have to think outside of their current like environment or outside the box, I suppose.
Right. So basically, it may not be a pass-fail, but it's definitely something you would investigate, their ability to switch context and to learn new things, change behaviors, for instance.
I think so,
which might be required. Yeah, cool. Does it go the other way? I mean, someone who is like every 9 months they're on a new thing. In recruiting, we would have a red flag there. I'm pretty certain recruiters would think, yeah, job hopper. That's, there's something to investigate there. Is there a maximum amount of time where there's a sweet spot?
I think it's the same. Like, I think there isn't a length of time that means that they're a bad candidate or a good candidate. I think it opens. I think it opens the door to ask different questions and to like understand why it is that they're moving on and what they couldn't achieve at their current role and what they want to achieve at their next role and these sorts of things. Yeah. So yeah, not like a specific length of time. I don't really care. I think I guess like something like 6 months or 9 months, I would kind of like that would like pop into my mind almost immediately, but it wouldn't like rule that candidate out.
What about, I mean, again, I don't want to just go on and on at this one point, but I remember reading something on, it was actually a tech thread, maybe it was on Hacker News or something, and they were referring to candidates that had kind of made a career out of having like one prestige employer. The person that got lucky at one point, got swept in from Google at some stage, and then thereafter they kind of traded off that because that then converted into a job at Amazon, and then that converted into another name brand business, because you would see that as a signal of quality, but in fact they weren't actually that good. And the way in which you could tell that is if their tenure at each of these companies was around about the 9 to 12 month mark, where quote unquote they may be found out. So I thought that was a really interesting in-community conversation. It was on Hacker News, definitely. I remember now. I'll try and drag that back up again, where they were all agreeing, yeah, we've all seen folks like this, walked in like a great CV, but basically there was a period of time where they would get exposed, and then that person would either voluntarily move on because they know they've been exposed, or it would come to a crux within the company.
Yeah, I guess you also get the opposite though, where maybe they were actually competent and they were good enough, but I suppose imposter syndrome set in and they themselves didn't think they were good enough, and that's why they left. And so what they're looking for is somewhere safe, like a company that they can safely like explore their I suppose their imposter syndrome and feel comfortable working in. I don't think just having like 9 months or whatever and kind of hopping between Google and Amazon, all these things, signifies someone who's not very good.
No, I agree. And by the way, it's not like direct mapping. So it's not causality. We're guessing and we're using loads of like, inappropriate ways of thinking about candidates, but inevitably we do. Ala, let's move to you on this. We're looking at CV. You look at more candidate CVs probably than anybody I know. I mean, is there anything that would look like, how does a developer put themselves on a digital place that makes them come across as a good candidate to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm in a lucky position, in a luxurious positions to have the CV, so of course that's great. I will look in the technical experience. I will look into, the expectations of the candidates and expectations of the hiring manager. But most of the time, I'm looking at the GitHub profiles, at the LinkedIn profiles, and the first thing that I'm paying attention to is how person started the let's say the path in this career. So I always like scroll back and down to just see what was the education and when the person started and what was that, because sometimes I can make a jokes with the engineers like, hey, I saw that you started with PHP and now you're Java developer, that's great. So I always start with the beginning of the career of the person, because I care about this story. So especially if it was a lawyer and decided I would like to be like a web developer. So that's what probably would be my approach. And the very interesting question was raised about the job hopping. So I'm an interim recruiter, and sometimes I'm changing the jobs because it's my assignments. And so once candidates wrote me and said, hey, I'm a little bit confused. You're changing the job so many times, and are you a job hopper? And I was laughing. I love this question, and I responded to the candidate, said, hey, no worries, I'm a freelancer, so it's safe to send me the CV, and I'm gonna help you. So, but yeah, you can also look, to be like opposite.
Maybe in future, as tenure becomes less, generally speaking, I think we're spending less time with the single employer as we go, generally speaking, and the shift to remote definitely will accelerate that. Perhaps tenure becomes a poorer signal over time to say anything, because it's kind of is a legacy of back in the day, where someone was perceived to be a poor candidate because they couldn't keep a job, rather than the circumstance you described for yourself, Ala, where you're voluntarily looking at assignment-based work rather than sticking with one business overall. Okay, let's look at. Go on.
Just on that point, I actually want to slightly disagree. I do think that it's more common for people to change jobs these days, but I think that makes it maybe even more of a premium when someone does stay for 3, 4, 5 years as an employer and says that that's kind of what they're looking for, versus someone who's maybe been 1 or 2 at the last few. Just because it takes so much time to onboard and hire someone, etc. So having that longevity is a really nice asset. Of course, you can't predict the future, and maybe the person will leave, but I do feel like that if you can find a developer who sticks with you for the long term, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, but I would say, I'm sorry, but I would say like it's also to be open about it is also important, because it could be personal story, that could be the situation in the market. If we are hiring worldwide, it's in some countries it's just normal, and so the people don't have an opportunity to keep up like in one company for a longer time since with the COVID situation. So I would definitely not reject the person that I would assume that is a job hopper. I will give a chance to just investigate more, and just to see if it's a good candidate, maybe circumstances.
Completely agree with you. I think you should definitely give it a chance, and I see a lot of companies just saying, oh, this person was at a company for 1 year or 1 year and a half, not even going to interview them. But I feel like I guess there's no magic 8 ball to predict the future, but if you're able to do that, or the candidate was extremely like, you know what, I'm here for the long haul and very empathetic on that and emphasize that a lot, then I think that's a great point, like a good value.
There's always a tension between what the optimal situation for the employer and the optimal situation for the candidate. And I think from the employer side, they want to reduce the risk to zero as much as they can. And they're just looking for these signals. Online testing is one of the ways in which they're trying to reduce that risk. So we talked a little bit about profile CV. Let's have a look at another style of assessment, which kind of gone into fashion and out of fashion and may actually be coming back again in a strange way. Whiteboard exercise. We went through like 18 months, 2 years period where we denigrated this. This is pre-COVID, by the way, so I don't know what the situation is now. Where I'm saying whiteboard exercise is totally irrelevant. But before that, it was quite widely used. Let's get the Sharpie out. Let's get in front of a whiteboard and discuss in an abstract way these challenges. Thoughts on this, Andy? Have you done one of these? How did you cope? Was it a test that you thought was valid?
Yes. I really like whiteboard interviews. I like from both sides of the interview, I suppose. I liked partaking in one to join to interview for a role. I like taking them. I like kind of talking with candidates and kind of taking them through the whiteboarding session. I think it's a really good session.
Why?
Yeah, super useful. Because I think it's a good addition to the take-home test or other technical tests. I don't think it's a replacement for a take-home test, and I also don't think a take-home test is a replacement for a whiteboard session. I think they both kind of go hand in hand. I think what it does is it kind of it shows it almost it lets a candidate demonstrate how they ask questions, what assumptions they make, what questions, like how do they talk to people, how do they are they kind of taking the whiteboard session as if they're talking to their team? Are they taking it as if they're asking questions to like someone who's giving them a problem to do? Are they like, it's kind of not even necessarily about just I suppose the solution on the whiteboard. It's about how they go about it.
That's really insightful, man. See, what you're talking about here is that it's as much a test of their communication skills and their ability to address an audience as it is, as you say, about working it out. It's like, do they understand how to communicate these topics or conversations to other people? That's super interesting. What are your thoughts then of this criticism that whiteboards have had? I mean, if you go, there's a big list of, we don't do whiteboard interviews, and it's like, list of like 5,000 companies, but using it as a point of employer branding to say we don't do this. So there was like a movement against it. What do you think's driven that, man? I
think whiteboarding can be seen as quite a scary thing, and I think as long as it's framed correct, like if it's framed correctly, it can be a good thing. I think framed incorrectly, where you're looking for a solution and you're trying to get a candidate to solve like an algorithm problem or a data structures problem or something like that in front of an audience on a whiteboard, I think is a very scary thing to do. It's almost like being back in school again and kind of being brought up to the front and, you know, showing everyone that you've been paying attention or whatever. It's just a really, really scary, awkward thing. But if that's not the framing, if the framing is around collaboration and the framing isn't necessarily around getting a correct answer on the board, then it's a much less scary thing. I think that's maybe where I suppose the fears come from.
That's, again, really insightful. Ala, how would you craft the message to a developer that is concerned about the whiteboard exam in such a way that they're going to feel comfortable with? I think, as Andy described it there, I totally get it. If it's like a pass-fail and I'm there to test whether you're good enough, sir, you know, that kind of attitude, of course, that's an unpleasant experience. But if it is the case, how do we describe it in a different way where we say, you know what, we're just going to talk this through and use it. The whiteboard is just there to help us map it out, to see what you think. How do we describe that in such a way to make people feel comfortable, Ala?
Yeah, I actually totally agree with the with the feelings that developers have, because they have to be on spot, and so not everyone is good on being on spot. And I think that's why it's controversial to have these whiteboard sessions is that some engineers just need some time, just a couple of minutes, just to think about the solution. This is the way how they think. So I would say I would go for a option when we can choose which tool we're going to use, because based on that, we are actually hiring a particular type of people, only those who can really be good at the sports, chatty, explain how the way of thinking. So how I help other candidates who, for example, are not that good at it and a little bit afraid of this, being in the middle of the conversation. I'm giving a very direct and detailed instructions, and I actually recorded a small video for them. How does it look like? So this is the board, this is the people, they're entering, they ask you questions. So if you discuss your decisions while you're doing them, gives us more information about your way of thinking and etc. So I'm trying to prepare them as much as I can with the small video, with the written introduction, and making sure that they're ready for that. But if you ask my personal opinion, I would say that given a choice to the candidate, that is something that could be a value in this to consider.
That's a really important point. Give the candidate agency to control that level of assessment. As you know, with someone like Andy, for instance, comfort level quite high with whiteboard, great. There's an option for you to pursue. Someone else who might be not happy with the whiteboard, maybe give some other type of format that they can have a similar type of idea. But on the tactical side of it, I love the video aspect, because I think sometimes it's a bit, it's like it's all about trying to just communicate these subtleties, which are very difficult to do purely in a textual way. Like Andy just described the framing of it. That would be quite hard to write in a message, in an email, I would say. But you've just expressed it. You both have expressed it in a way which I thought was super easy to understand. So maybe a video would be a great way, not to soften the blow, but to put in the necessary nuance in this situation. Okay, folks, listen, I'm just looking at the time again, and we're like zooming through this. I've got 2 more people to bring on board. I'm very keen to bring them on board, so please stay with us. We're gonna bring Kritika and Ming Ho back on again. They're 2 developers. We're going to talk to them about tech-to-tech interviewing, another aspect of the assessment, how we assess people. Let's see how they feel about that. Stay with us, Andy and Ala. We'll hopefully try and bring you back at some point.
Thank you.
Cool. Super interesting. Hey, Ilya.
Yeah, it's such a topic, eh? How do you find the right person for your team? You think it'd be so simple.
You know what? It's one of these where there's so many just layers to it. I mean, particularly you're talking about the mindset. What I got from Andy and Ala there was the mindset of the employing organization, or indeed even the hiring manager. Like if you set this thing up to just, demonstrate your superiority over someone, then of course that's going to be a hostile situation. But if it's a genuine exploration, then that's a totally different kettle of fish. Okay, cool. We've got 2 more people to join us. We have Kritika Puri. Kritika, how are you doing? Good to see you. And we've got Ming Ho Shang again. Great to see you too. Okay, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourselves to the camera, please? So Kritika, you go first.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Just a sound check.
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Okay, yeah. So hi, I'm Kritika Puri. I'm working with Rival Technologies, and I've been hired through VanHack in Vancouver, and I'm working as a senior software engineer there.
Fantastic stuff. And Ming Ho, great to see you back on the show. But for the people who didn't see you last week, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm a software web developer for 10 years already. And yeah, I've been working in different kind of startups in different scales, different areas, and different stages. Yeah, that's basically me. Hopefully this time the connection will be better.
Already a lot better. And yeah, great to have you both on the show. So thank you for joining us. We've been talking about tech and sort of tech assessments overall. We've dealt with a number of different things, but for you two, I want us to focus on one aspect of it, the tech to tech interview. So in other words, this is the moment where you've talked to the recruiter, you've maybe done a technical test, but now you're going to be speaking to an engineer who, yes, it's an informal conversation, etc. But you also know they're going to be probing for information. They're going to be trying to figure out, what your skill set is, etc. Verbally, probably via video now, but previously via face-to-face, I would imagine. What would you say? How does this stage of the process make you feel as a candidate? I'll go with you first, Kritika.
Yeah, so I think with this phase, firstly, you get very excited because you know that you've crossed one level of it where you're trying to now talk to somebody from the team who's there on the team with the company. So I think it really puts you in a position where you want to know what is the team actually looking for, what are they trying to retrieve out of that talk that they're going to have with you. So it's more about knowing what is the thought process of the person whom I'm going to talk to, or what are they expecting for me to know sometimes, kind of heads up whether it's just an informal talk about my career, my background, or my technical skill set, or is it more like a tech interview where we are just going to talk about some algorithmic question. So I think one clarity on that really helps you prepare, whether you want to just talk about yourself, present yourself, your personality, your aspirations with why you want to join that company. Is it that sort of a talk, or is it more like just going in for a small tech screen or a small algorithmic question for like 30 minutes or something, where they can talk to you and know how you code? So I think that is one first initial thought process that comes to a developer's mind.
They're two totally different conversations, aren't they? And the first one, as you say, curiosity is the drive, a mutual curiosity where we're trying to find out a little bit more about each other. As you say, we're excited. Maybe it's not the first stage already. We've gone past a couple of stages already. So confidence is built, and probably relationships have built as you go. So it's an exciting moment. But the other one, I think, is totally different, like feeling wise, right? If this person is gonna
So I've been facing both of them. So I know that there were a couple of instances where I was not aware. I'm going into a conversation with the person on the team, but sometimes if I'm not sure what kind of conversation it's going to be, then sometimes it just kind of takes away a little bit of your chance to prep yourself beforehand. So sometimes it can go both ways. That is what I've seen. It sometimes goes in the first kind of conversation where you just have a informal chat about yourself, get to know each other type. And sometimes it just goes to a technical question itself. So I think that is one thought process that just comes to a developer's mind, I guess. If you've already faced such a situation where it could go anyway.
You know what? This is one of those where a recruiter's role, even though they're not actually in the conversation, is super important, because they've got to establish with the interviewer exactly what the approach is. Because let's not forget, this developer who's going to be doing the interviewing is not a professional interviewer. Day to day, they're doing something else. And then oftentimes they're just roped in to say, oh, check this person out. But they've not necessarily been given themselves the right briefing as to how to do that. So I think the recruiter's role is actually to ensure that the interviewer is properly briefed, or at least we understand what we're trying to achieve during the interview. And then it's to communicate that to the candidate, to then allow the candidate to have the necessary preparation, even if it is just a mindset preparation for it. Super important. How about you, Ming-Ho? Similar kind of question, really. I mean, having gone through you've probably been through on both sides, haven't you, where you've interviewed people and been interviewed and stuff like this. How is that what does it make you feel about doing these interviews? Is there a good way to do it, for instance, or is there a bad way that you've kind of experienced over the time that you've been a developer?
Yeah, for me, when I interview people, I think it's really important that we figure out what we need in the team before the interview, even before the posted job description. We need to know what kind of people we're looking for and what kind of role we need still in the team. I think that's quite important, because sometimes the bad experience for me is that sometimes I interview with probably a manager or another developers, but they don't really know what they're looking for, because it might be quite different. Like senior developer, it maybe varies. I mean, in different kind of team, different kind of culture, and the different kind of responsibility. So I think that is the most important thing, that as a interviewer, we need to figure that out first. The second thing is,
interrupt, Ming-Ho, just for the audience. Basically, role definition internally is super important before you even engage in the exercise. That should be a given. And actually, if you're not clear on what the role is, that's not equipping anybody to be able to interview against it. Because what are you meant to be looking for? You're going to end up. It's impossible to create a good experience if you don't have that clarity. Okay, sorry to interrupt, Ming-Ho. Go ahead with the second thing.
Yeah. Because for me, interview is not just like from the company side to interview the interviewee, but also like it's a kind of interview that we interview each other. If we meet both the needs from both sides. So for me, when I interview the candidates, I would like focus on what he or she has been doing and what the experiences. And another important thing is what he or she is looking for right now, and what he or she wants to develop, what want to get from here, and what he or she assume that he can get here. I think that's really important. We also have to know, like, be honest and to know, like, what we can provide, what we can offer to them, what kind of resources we have. Yeah, that is
So
really important.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with that, because I remember I've been in situations with my previous company where I have taken interviews for the company as well. So I've seen a lot of developers coming up with these questions that they want to interview the company as well to know that what I'm sitting for is actually what I'm looking for. So I think that's what you're saying is really absolutely correct. So
Yeah, because sometimes we're like we're looking for a really like brilliant, really like awesome developers, but we couldn't like really offer them the resource they need, and then it's kind of a waste of time for both sides, because probably they joined, but then after like a few months they leave. Right. So that's a good part, really good part. I think VanHack is doing really well, because they try to like meet the needs from both sides, in a really efficient way.
Yeah. What about the issue of bias in interview? Because it seems to me that the traditional way in which a tech interview takes place is one developer with one developer interviewer, right? And we know if it's a one-to-one interview, the chances of bias actually increase because this person is now the gatekeeper. I mean, I remember back in the day when I was working as a recruiter, there was like, you knew who were the good interviewers in terms of the devs, because you would basically, as a recruiter, you'd try and get the developers that you knew were A, could represent the business positively, but B, were willing to do it, and C, had the degree of internal respect to be able to say yes, no on technical capability of these candidates coming through. That's all well and good. Then I realized that's a problem, because suddenly you might have someone who is a gatekeeper internally that might be saying no to talented people that he didn't like. Like, how do you deal with that? Typically you get 2 interviews, but that's 2 developers out of your production cycle, right? How much time and effort is that going to take? What are your thoughts on this? One-to-one interviews, how do you deal with bias? If you can't deal with it, how do you make the case there should be 2 people doing the interview? Go to you first, Kritika, with this.
I think personally, I haven't had this experience personally, but yeah, if I think about it, then I think as you're saying that you can have like 2 people on the panel to judge you. So I think it helps you in a way where even if like say suppose I'm talking to one person and the other person is just listening in. So at the end of the interview, when they're actually assessing your profile and judging whether you've done well or not, so you have a way of knowing that if one person has missed out on something, the other person has picked that up. And personally, if I would feel that there are like 2 people on the panel, sometimes I feel a few people get scared by it. As developers, that why am I speaking with 2 people, and now is the level of or the intensity of questions or the number of questions going to increase, and how am I going to face both of them? So it does put you in a position where you get scared. But I think from a developer's point of view, when you know that there are 2 people listening to you, the chances of your points that you're putting forward being picked up by them is more. And in case, as you're talking about bias, as if you feel that you're in that situation, that would also help you. That you know that there are 2 people, and if even if one of them was in that position, where you feel that there was some bias here and there, that you have a 50% chance with the other person as well who's listening to you. So I think that is where I would say that it can help you.
It's a really good point that increasing the number of people interviewing you might actually create an intimidation factor, right? It becomes a little bit more crikey, I'm under pressure. So it's almost like you're trying to make the mix right, but in fact, you might actually also be, it's almost like trying to for some reason, I'm thinking of making a cake recipe. You know, you got to put too much sugar in here, and then you try to cut it with something else, and then suddenly it doesn't work because you've overcorrected. But a standard practice is to do more than one person to eliminate the probability of bias, but it's not without challenge, as you mentioned. Cool.
I have an experience with that as well. I have a really I think that also helps with sometimes, for example, myself. Sometimes I have some hard time understanding some quite different accent. And I have one experience really interesting experience that I interviewed with 2 developers. They're really nice and really sweet. They try to guide me through something, but unfortunately, they have the same accent that I couldn't understand. Yep. So that takes me more time to try to try and error to guess what they're talking about. Yeah.
You know what?
So
this is such an interesting challenge that's probably. In some respects, it might have been a peripheral challenge, an important but peripheral challenge pre-COVID. But let's say we're now going to a world where suddenly, our dev team is going to be anywhere. People can recruit wherever. Then suddenly you are going to be interacting with people with different ways of register, different sort of ways of speaking rhythms, etc. And your basic ability to understand is going to be a big factor in your assessment. And in fact, we know whenever there's accent is strong or the listening quality is not right, your brain has to work extra hard to pay attention, and no one likes to do that. So this is where people will switch off and say no because they can't be bothered to expend the cognitive effort to pay that attention. So, crikey, very, very interesting challenge there. Okay, cool. Listen, we are flying through the time here, guys. I'm really sorry, but it seems that we are well over already. I just want to leave it with a few more thoughts. Before we let you go, Kritika and Ming-Ho, what are your thoughts on the if you could recommend a way in which to structure a tech-to-tech interview? What is the one thing you'd recommend companies put into place so that you get the best out of the developer coming through? Go to you first, Ming-Ho, on that.
Okay. For me, I would say it's super important to like what I mentioned, to figure out what we're looking for, what kind of people we're looking for. The second thing is to structure it better. And the definition of to structure it better is that to know the purpose for each session really clear. And for example, probably the first one is the personality. The main focus is on the personality, and the second one probably is on the technical part, and the third one is the team culture part. Yeah, this purpose should be it's better to have it really clear than we on something that and have different assessments. Yeah, I think.
And even better if that clarity was very transparent. There's no reason why that shouldn't be a public thing. To say, hey, our approach to recruiting or assessment is this way, and this is the reason why it's like that. There's no reason why that should be a privately, or why that should not be publicly articulated. Okay, final word to you, Kritika. If you could create sort of a tech-to-tech type interview situation that was perfect, how would you put it together?
I think I would just start with a brief introduction. I won't spend much time on the introduction with the person whom I'm talking to, suppose. And then just if you have decided to just go with one algorithmic question, if it's just a basic technical interview, then I think you should just, if you as an interviewer, you know that what is the level of question that you're giving to the developer to code if it's an algorithmic question, right? So I think time management and deciding what amount of time do you want to give to the developer to code it, as well as then ask your follow-up questions, and how many times do you want to stop in between and then ask a question. So I think the number of stops you want to take while the developer is coding and the amount of time you want to spend with that questionnaire with them on how they've approached to the problem is something that should be well planned, so that it does not happen in a way that you are either the developers just like spend the entire time coding and they've not been able to answer the questions, or has it been like that the developer or the questions that the question that the interviewer was asking were taking too much of time that the code could not be completed. So I think time management in terms of on both the sides, not just the developer but the person who's listening to you, is also important.
And thank you, Kritika. And this is the main reason why Hung Lee should never be involved in any of this tech interviewing, because my time management is totally terrible. We're like literally shot over by about 30 minutes. So listen, thank you very much, you two. Great having you on the show. We're going to do two more. We're going to do two more of these. So there's still more to come. Episode 3, episode 4. I forget exactly what we're going to be talking about in those places, but we're going to be doing 2 more. And hopefully you two will come back and have a chat with us on those things as well. Anyway, let me let you go. I know for you very late in the day, Kritika, so have a very good weekend. And Mingho, thank you for joining us for this show.
Bye.
Bye.
Kritika, bye, Mingho. So good to see you both.
That was great. Great people. So many interesting thoughts. And I love speaking to people that aren't professional recruiters about recruiting activities, Ilya. I think you can learn a lot because, we go back to your original point about LinkedIn universe. We're oftentimes in a recruiter universe where, this is very tunnel vision and this is how it is. But then you get someone from the outside and they've actually got really interesting insights that, you've simply either ignored early on, or you're carrying some sort of path dependency in your head that they don't have, and they can really give you some insight there. Any final thoughts on this, Ilya, before we finish?
No, it was a lot of fun. Thanks again for having us. Me and Kritika and Mingho were two VanHack candidates who we helped get hired, so having them as well. It was great. I guess happy holidays, everybody who's watching this. And if people want to reach out, I'm pretty easy to talk to on LinkedIn Alternate Universe.
That's what we're going to call it now, the alternative universe. Okay, folks, that's great stuff. Let's kill it from here and forward. If you do enjoy this show and you want to see more from a developer's point of view, follow the channel because you'll be updated January and February when we have these shows. I think they're going to be pretty early on. So we're going to be similar format, multiple developers coming on screen to help us talk through these problems. Okay, that's about it for now. I will be emailing everyone after this to say, hey, check these people out. Other than that, that is it. Have a good weekend, everybody, and I'll see you next week, maybe. If not, the week following. See you later, everyone.
Cheers.
That's it, Ilya. We're still broadcasting, but it's the end of the show as far as I'm concerned. So well done, man. Sorry it took so long, by the way. Typically I would finish close to 50 minutes, 60 minutes, but this took like 90 minutes. But I think it's the evidence that essentially the people that were on had really good input. By the way, did you check the poll, Ilya? Can you see the poll at the bottom?
Yeah, paired programming one. Are you sure we're still? It says live for me here. Are you sure we're not live still?
Yeah, we're still broadcasting. But the show is over as far as I'm legit. Just don't say anything rude, man. This is like behind the scenes. You know what I mean? I might cut this into a compilation video or something. But I tell you what was interesting. Pair programming was the absolute clear winner, right?
Yeah, it's still human to human interaction is can't beat it.
The closest to the job itself is the top. And maybe that's a route forward for the, I'm sure all of these coding platforms have a facility for that, where if you want, you can sit the developer in there to, walk through the coding, which is much more normal than a, blank screen, you can't communicate with anybody type of exam. So, the show's not over. Allah, I know. This is all part of the plan.
Bonus content.
Yeah, bonus content. Anyway, maybe the show should be over. So, Ilya, listen, let me let you go. I'll chat to you soon, man. You take care of yourself. You have a good rest of the day. And yeah, we'll talk before the Christmas period, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hung, and thanks again, everybody. Have a good time. Take care.
Yes, Allah, don't worry. It's not going to be a case where suddenly I'm going to get up and reveal my underpants or something. That's actually for Christmas. No. All right, that's it. End of the show. I'll see you soon.